started, we are going to create a slip knot, and in order to do that, we are just going to wrap the yarn around our finger. You don't need a lot of a tail. And then you're going to wrap it a second time behind the first strand that you wrapped. Then you're going to take that first strand and just kind of ever so gently loosen it so it's a lot looser than the one on the back. That way we can slide our hook right up underneath it, grab that second strand and pull it through, and then just pull it tight. And as you can see, that has created our slip knot. Now, we can tighten it on the hook a little bit, but you do want to keep it loose enough that your hook can slide through. And now we are going to create a foundation chain of 52 loops. Now remember that the loop that is on your hook right now, that is your slip knot. That does not count as a loop in your foundation chain. So that is not your first loop. Your first loop does not start until you create one. So let's begin a foundation chain of 52 loops. So when you have your 52 loops in your foundation chain, we're going to turn our work. You want to make sure that your foundation chain is straight, because if it is crooked, you will start to create a corkscrew effect in your foundation chain, and you want to make sure that you are working straight across. So to get started, we're going to work a half double crochet, not into the first chain from the hook, nor the second chain. We're going to go into the third chain from the hook. Now, to do a half double crochet, you do yarn over on the hook. So you know you have your single chain here. We're going to yarn over. Now we're going to skip to that third chain from the hook. So there's 1, 2, and 3. We're going to insert our hook right into that third chain. We're going to yarn over, and we're going to pull that yarn through, and that gives us 3 loops on the hook. We're then going to yarn over again and pull through all 3 loops, and that is our first half double crochet. Now, the 2 chains that we skipped created the actual very first half double crochet in our foundation chain. So now, even though we've only done 1, we actually have 2 half double crochets. We have this first one right here, and then we have the second one that we created. Let me come a little closer so you can see that. So right here, the 2 chains that we skipped, that created your first half double crochet. Let me pull this off the hook so you can see it even better. So there is your first half double crochet from your 2 chains that you skipped, and then here's the half double crochet that you made, and that creates the second half double crochet. So let's put our work back onto our hook, and we're going to continue doing a half double crochet across into each chain. When you finish, you will have a total of 50 half double crochets. So go ahead and continue working along your foundation chain, making half double crochets into each chain, and I will meet up with you at the end of this row. This will complete row 1, which is also known as our foundation row. I've finished row 1. It should look a lot like this. And you should have a total of 50 half double crochets in it. Now, before we go on to row 2, let's talk about our foundation tail. You can either save it and weave it in at the end, or you can work it in the project as you go. For this tutorial, we're going to work it in. So we're going to take it and fold it up and over so we can get it kind of out of the way for the moment. And then we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2. That chain 2 is going to count as our turning chain to increase the height of our row for the next row, but it's also going to serve as our very first half double crochet. So let's go ahead and turn our work. And as we turn our work, you'll notice that that foundation tail is on the very top of our work. Now, this chain 2 is going to count as our first half double crochet. So we are not going to have to work into the space at the base of that chain 2, because that chain 2 is counting as a half double crochet. So therefore that space is already taken. So now we're going to work the next half double crochet into the very next stitch. And as we do, we're going to make sure that we have this foundation tail in it as well. And as we work that half double crochet, we've got that foundation tail worked right in there up against the work. All right, let's do another one. And again, we've included that foundation tail. And doing a couple more. And after you've worked a couple and you are comfortable and feel like your tail is secure enough in there, then you can go ahead and cut off the remaining excess. And we've just about got that whole foundation tail worked in. We have just a little bit left over, so we're going to cut that off. And so we're just going to snip that little tail off. And then we're just going to continue making our half double crochets down the rest of the row. Now row 2 is going to be our repeating row, but I'm going to go ahead and finish it up with you. So continue making half double crochets all the way down row 2, and I will meet up with you at the very end. And this is what row 2 will look like. So you can see it is starting to take on the shape of your pillow. Now, this is a very easy project for someone who is a beginner at crocheting. It can definitely boost your confidence, make you feel great about making a wonderful Christmas present for a friend or loved one. And it is something that you can do very successfully. It is just a matter of repeating the half double crochet stitch. So if you can get that half double crochet stitch down, you can create a foundation chain, then you can successfully be able to make this pillow. Now, to help out those that are beginning, I'm going to just pull my hook out here just a little bit. I want to show you how to make sure, if you're not comfortable with knowing for sure where you end up at the very end stitch, you can put a stitch marker in the end of each of your stitches, so when you come to that stitch marker, you know that that is your last stitch for that new row. Once you've completed it, you can then move your stitch marker up into the top of that one, and on each side continue doing that, so that you know for sure that you have successfully reached the end of your row. If you don't want to use the stitch markers, that is perfectly fine. Then as you're going, just always remember the rule that I have shown before, And let me pull this stitch marker out so I can show you. If you're uncertain, if you've come to the end and you don't know if you have created that last stitch of the row, just remember that if you lay your work down and use your hand as a guide, if there's any space showing, and you can see the red showing through, then you know that you have not completed that last stitch. So let's create the next stitch, and let's see if that one's the last one. All right, let's lay our work back down, get our yarn out of the way so it's not an issue. And pull that out a little bit so the hook is away from the work. And let me lay my hand down. And do you see any red? You do not, even straightening your work. The only red you're seeing is where that loop, okay? And so that's another indicator that you have placed the stitch into the very last stitch and you have no more to go. Because sometimes it can be tricky and this chain 2 from before will stick out, making you feel like, oh, I've got space for one more, but you don't. Make sure that your work is nice and straight. And again, if you're not using a stitch marker, then lay it down flat. And if there are no spaces, then you know you have that last stitch. But it is very easy to let that chain 2 from the previous row look like you have one more stitch to make. So again, if you're not certain, then go ahead and use your stitch markers. And that was the last stitch I created right there. So I'm going to go ahead and slip my stitch marker in there until I create one more, and then I can move it up. So let's go ahead and chain 2 and start row 3. Now let's just kind of take this stitch marker and pull it out the way, and we're going to go ahead and work into that stitch. We're going to create our first half double crochet, and then we can take this stitch marker, pull it out, and we can move it up to the next row and put it in the very top of that stitch. Grab our hook, and we can continue making half double crochets down the row. And there you go. You can see that it's nice and perfectly symmetrical. And same thing, when you get all the way down here, you can go ahead and work your stitch into that last stitch. If it's difficult for you to make the stitch with the stitch marker in, well, once you know you're at that last stitch, then go ahead and pop it out, work your last stitch, and then before you do your chain 2, go back and reinsert it. And so you want to continue repeating row 2 until your piece measures a total of 30 inches. Once your piece measures a total of 30 inches, I will come back and I'll show you what to do next. Happy crocheting, and I will meet you at the end when your pillow has reached a height of 30 inches. Also, just a little tip, you might want to add a stitch marker on the front side of your work. So for example, we are getting ready to go down row 3. So this is the front side of my work. I always like to mark which is the front side and which is the wrong side. Normally you can tell because if your foundation tail is on the left side of your work, then you know that the right side, the front side, is facing you. But if you've worked your tail in like we have, then you might need to mark it just so you know, because the front side, or also known as the right side, is the side that you want to be facing out and seen when the project is complete. So in order to do that, you can simply just add another stitch marker right on the front side anywhere. And let's see if I can see here. Just grab a little couple loops and then just indicate it that way. So as we continue doing our rows, when we get done, if we're not sure, we'll know because we've already marked it with a stitch marker. When your piece is measured about 30 inches, and I am going to turn this sideways. Unfortunately, my camera space is not wide enough to show it to you all at one time. So I'm just going to have to kind of work it the best I can under the camera here. I'm going to get my measuring tape. And in order to do this, I will apologize. I'm going to have to turn it upside down so that I can start with a 0. But I'm going to go ahead and measure this out. And because of camera wise, I'm going to stop at the 15-inch mark. And I'm going to try and see if I can pick this up and move it. Wasn't done so gracefully, but trying. All right, and then we're going to keep going, and let's grab it at the 25 here. I hope you can see that that's a 25. And I'm going to try and slide it down. There we go. And mine is just a little bit longer than the 30 inches. That is not going to hurt it. I could take a row out if I want, but I did end with an even row, meaning that when I counted them, I had an even number of rows going down. Mine ended at, it had 88 rows in it. So 85 rows would have probably been enough to get it right at 30 inches. But again, I wanted to keep it with an even number of rows. So mine has 88. It is slightly, it's about 30.5 inches. That is not going to hurt the project. So as long as you have it somewhat around the 30 inches, it'll make a nice size pillow. What's more important is you do want to try and end with an even number of rows. And you can pretty much successfully look at the rows and be able to tell how to count them. And as you can see, there's almost like a raised ridge every other row. And that's what I did. I just used that raised part and counted out. And so the flat part would make row 2. So if you skip the raised part and go to the next flat, that would be 4, 6, 8, and so forth. If you start from the other end, the end that your yarn is not attached to, the end that you started from, and let me pull that back down so you can see what I'm talking about. You can see that the flat part was the first part, and then the ridge started. So you can do that way and go 2, 4, 6, 8, and so forth, and count your rows. Now, and you can see I've got my stitch marker here, so I know that this is my front side. This is the side of the pillow that I want to be facing out. So I'm going to turn my pillow over, and if I fold it in half, hopefully I'll be able to get all of this onto the camera for you, and I'm going to do my best to do that. Make sure it's nice and even. And so this is kind of about the size my pillow is going to be. Perfect size for a square pillow. And to finish up part 1 of this tutorial, we are finished with our green as far as making our pillow, but we need enough of a tail left to be able to sew our remaining 3 ends together, because when we fold it in half, this end right here is already sealed. So we need a tail long enough that we will be able to complete the pillow. Now, when we go to sew the pillow, okay, because say, for example, our yarn is right here, we will be able to weave in this side and then this far side over here, leaving an additional side open for us to stuff with. Now, yes, this is the top of the pillow, but I like to keep my yarn attached as much as possible. Now, I could either come down the side here. Let me get this pulled up for you here. So I can either come down the side and close in my pillow with this strand, or I could go across the top, but I'd only be able to do one side. So if I close in the top and then the far side over here, I'll be able to use one strand of yarn, and that's what we want to be able to do. So in order to make sure that I have enough yarn to do that, well, let's just come back over here with this side, since you can see that. And we want to take our yarn and we're going to run it the length of that side one time. Then we're going to turn it and run it up the length of our side a second time. And that should be enough yarn to be able to close up both of the 2 sides we want. But I always want to make sure I have enough rather than not enough. So I'm going to run my yarn along the side a third time, and then I am going to go ahead and clip it and cut it off using my travel scissors. And that is the yarn that I will use to sew in my edges. All right, and then I will need one more piece of yarn to be able to sew in the side that I put the stuffing in. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to run a piece of yarn the length of one side, because my pillow is the same size all the way around. So I'm going to run it one length. That should be all I need, but again, I'd rather be safe and have enough yarn. So I am going to just go ahead and run it down my piece a second time. There we go. These are cute little travel scissors. They go like this, and then there's this little plastic tip I can stick on them to keep the blade from moving. And then it looks like a little pin. So you see it says mini scissors. Hopefully, oops, hopefully that'll zoom in for you. Not that that is important, but I don't think it's going to zoom in. Again, it wasn't that important that you see that, but there we go. But cute little carrying thing for scissors. So, all right. So now I'm going to take this piece of yarn and put it to the side. for next week. And then I'm going to take a stitch marker and I'm going to secure my work down so I don't lose any stitches until we come back together next week. Next week we will close in the sides of our pillow. We will stuff it. So I hope you have enjoyed part 1 of this tutorial for the Christmas pillow. And I look forward to meeting with you next week as we complete the formation of our actual pillow. Take care, be joyful, stay crafty in your own way, and make your own joyful creations. And I hope you have fun creating the Christmas pillow.